Every night, like clockwork, the piercing cries of their daughter Poppy would echo through the house, leaving her parents desperate for answers. They tried everything to soothe their daughter, but to no avail. The family's old, loyal dog, Duke, always seemed anxious, pacing back and forth as the crying intensified. One night, they decided to monitor Duke's actions closely, only to uncover a chilling truth that made them turn pale. "No! Stop!" Mia yelled as she ran into her daughter's room. She had just watched the baby cam and spotted something that made all the hairs on her body stand up straight. She picked up her crying daughter and ran out of the room, pulling the door shut behind her. Duke barked like a maniac, still inside Poppy's room, but Mia was too frightened to go back. "Roger, you have to go," Mia said to her husband as she jumped on the bed, still holding Poppy in her arms. "Do," she cried, trying to say Duke's name. "You have to get him out of there," Mia yelled again, so Roger quickly hurried out of bed and disappeared into the dark hallway. They would only hear muffled sounds, but it sounded like he was struggling. "Mia, get out of the house!" Roger yelled shortly after. Without a second thought, she ran out of the front door and stood in the front yard, looking up at Poppy's bedroom window. Not long after, Duke ran out of the house, followed by Roger, who shut the front door behind him and locked it. But why was Poppy crying? Who or what was inside her room? And what did Duke have to do with it? Poppy had always been an amazing sleeper. She slept through the night from a very young age and never had any trouble sleeping in her own room. It wasn't until she was a little older than 3 that she began to wake up in the middle of the night, screaming and crying. To make her feel better, Mia decided to let Duke sleep in the room with her, but that didn't change a thing. Duke was already a part of the family when Poppy was born, so she pretty much grew up with him by her side. Duke had never shown any form of aggression toward Poppy, always protecting her and lying by her side. Mia and Roger had expected nothing less, as Duke had a very kind soul, something you wouldn't say based on his looks. They had taken Poppy to a sleep therapist, but after many tests, no one knew what was causing her distress at night. Roger really didn't want to have Poppy sleep in their bed, as she had done so well sleeping on her own. But after weeks and weeks of waking up at night, that was the only thing left they could try. Suddenly, Mia thought of one final thing they could try before the co-sleeping method. "Let's place a camera in her room," she said one evening. Roger was stunned that he hadn't thought of that before and immediately went to grab the baby cam they had stored away. They installed the cam in a corner of Poppy's room so that they could see it all. That night, Mia lay in bed, tossing and turning. She checked the monitor almost every hour, but Poppy seemed to be sleeping fine. It was a little frustrating, as she wanted to help her child. She felt so useless, not knowing what was hurting or scaring her daughter so much at night. She knew it wasn't her fault, but it felt like she was failing. Roger noticed Mia's sleeplessness and wrapped his arm around her. "We'll figure this out," he said, his voice low and sleepy. "You being sleep-deprived would be no good to her," he added, before falling back asleep. Mia knew he was right, but it was easier said than done. She envied his ability to sleep so peacefully and hated it at the same time. She fell asleep shortly after and woke up startled by the morning sun shining through the curtains. "Poppy," she whispered as she jumped out of bed and ran to her room. For the first time in weeks, she saw Poppy happily playing with her stuffed animals in her bed, her eyes well rested and no teary residue on her cheeks. "She slept through the night," Mia mumbled to herself. "She slept through the night," she yelled at Roger, who came through the door. "Actually, she didn't," Roger said, placing his hand on Mia's shoulder. "After you fell asleep, Poppy woke up crying, not screaming, but still crying, and I held her for a little while, letting you sleep." Mia didn't know how to feel. "Did you check the cam? Do you know why she cried?" Roger fell silent. "Well, no," he answered. He wanted to explain himself, but Mia was too irritated to listen. "What's the point of the camera if you don't even look at the monitor?" She sighed as she took Poppy from his hands and walked out of the room. Roger followed them into the kitchen and silently made breakfast while Mia put on a show for Poppy. "We'll try again tonight," he said as he gave Mia her morning coffee. She had cooled down a bit and apologized for her tone from before. "We're all trying," she said before kissing her husband on the cheek. "We'll try again tonight." The rest of the day went smoothly, and Poppy seemed to have more energy than on other days. But little did they know that tonight would change everything. As dusk turned to night, Poppy clung to her mother, her small body tense. "Room scary," she whispered, eyes wide with fear. This was new. Poppy had never been scared of her room before. Mia tried to comfort her, but Poppy's grip only tightened. Mia glanced at Roger, unsure. They had never seen Poppy like this, refusing to even step toward her bedroom door. Mia and Roger finally managed to get Poppy into her bed, but the victory was short-lived. As they closed the door behind them, Poppy's cries filled the house, each sob slicing through Mia's heart. She paced outside the door, biting her lip, fighting the urge to rush in and scoop Poppy into her arms. Roger placed a hand on her shoulder, a silent plea for patience. Roger's voice broke the tension. "Let's try something different tonight," he suggested, his eyes firm yet understanding. He believed that facing her fears with comfort might reveal the root of Poppy's terror. Mia hesitated, but finally nodded, the sound of Poppy's distress pushing her to agree. They decided to bring Poppy into their bed, hoping to calm her fears and uncover what was truly scaring her. Poppy's cries eventually subsided into quiet sniffles, and she fell asleep from sheer exhaustion. Duke, however, remained on high alert. He paced around Poppy's empty room, stopping at intervals to sniff the air and listen. His ears were perked up and his eyes darted around the room. It was clear Duke sensed something amiss, but whatever it was remained unseen to Mia and Roger. Mia settled back in her bed, the baby monitor's glow a constant presence in the dark room. Despite Poppy's peaceful slumber next to her, sleep eluded Mia. She found herself watching the monitor intently, the quiet of the house amplifying her unease. Duke lay asleep on the floor of Poppy's room, his calm presence on the screen the only comfort she could find. Just as sleep began to claim her, Mia's eyes snapped open. On the monitor, Duke stirred, his head lifting abruptly to stare into the dark room. Mia watched, puzzled, as Duke's attention was fixed on something she couldn't see. Her heart raced a little. What had caught Duke's attention in the dead of night? Duke resumed his pacing, his movements measured and deliberate. Poppy, however, remained undisturbed, a detail that struck Mia as odd. She had always assumed Poppy's restlessness was linked to Duke's agitation. Yet, here was Duke, clearly unsettled, while Poppy slept soundly. Mia leaned closer to the monitor, curious and slightly anxious. Suddenly, Duke's low growl filled the room, the sound so soft Mia had to turn the volume up to hear it clearly. Her eyes widened as she searched the screen for any hint of the cause. Then, without warning, Poppy stirred. Mia held her breath, waiting for the cries to start, but Poppy's reaction was unexpected. Instead of the immediate tears Mia anticipated, Poppy sat up and looked directly at Duke, their eyes locking in a silent exchange. Only then did Poppy begin to cry, her sobs different this time, tinged with fear rather than frustration. Mia's heart clenched. What was happening in that room to frighten her child? She knew she had to find out, but nothing could have prepared her for what came next. Duke's growls escalated into fierce barks, directed at a corner of Poppy's room, invisible to Mia's anxious gaze on the monitor. Poppy's screams pierced the night, confirming her terror was real, not just a shadow or a nightmare. Mia's heart raced, torn between rushing in immediately and waiting to understand the source of their fear. Mia's mind raced as she weighed her options. If it was just a shadow scaring Poppy, she didn't want to overreact. Yet, the intensity of Duke's growls and Poppy's cries suggested something more sinister. Mia stood frozen for a moment, debating. Then with resolve, she slipped into her slippers, the baby monitor clutched tight in her hand as she made her way to the hallway. As Mia crept down the hallway, Poppy's cries grew louder, and on the monitor she could see her daughter pointing frantically at something just beyond the camera's view. With each step, Mia's resolve hardened. She had to protect her daughter, no matter what awaited her. The cold floor beneath her slippers seemed to echo her racing heart as she neared Poppy's room. The tension broke as Duke's barks turned into a frenzy and Poppy's screams reached a fever pitch. Whatever they saw, it was real and terrifying. As Mia reached Poppy's door, her breath caught in her throat at the sight that greeted her through the gap. Without a second thought, she pushed the door open, prepared to face their unseen terror. With a burst of adrenaline, Mia rushed into the room, scooping Poppy into her arms. She could feel her daughter's heart pounding against her own as she quickly retreated, slamming the door shut behind them. The fear was palpable, but Mia's only thought was to get Poppy to safety, away from whatever had caused such terror. In the chaos of fleeing, Mia realized with a pang of guilt that Duke was still in Poppy's room. She dashed into her bedroom, Poppy's cries filling the space as she held her tight. Duke's absence was a sharp, cold reminder of the nightmare they had left behind in Poppy's room. Landing on the bed, Mia's abrupt movements woke Roger, who was instantly alarmed by the sight of Mia clutching a distraught Poppy. His sleep-addled mind struggled to grasp the situation, the urgency in Mia's movements and Poppy's uncontrollable tears signaling a crisis beyond his immediate understanding. "Roger, you have to go," Mia urged, barely catching her breath, Poppy's cries for Duke breaking her heart. Roger, still piecing together the night's events from Mia's fragmented sentences and Poppy's desperate calls for Dew, realized the gravity of the situation. The safety of their dog, left behind, hit him with a sudden clarity. Shock erased Roger's confusion, replaced by a rush of adrenaline. "What happened?" he asked, but Mia's frantic tone left no room for explanations. "Get Duke out of there," she implored. Understanding the urgency, Roger leaped from the bed, propelled by the need to protect Duke as much as they had Poppy. Roger hurried toward Poppy's room, his heart racing with a mix of fear and determination. Unsure of what awaited him, but fueled by the need to safeguard his family, both human and canine, he prepared himself for whatever threat had caused such terror in the hearts of his wife and daughter. Roger opened Poppy's door to find Duke in the center of the room, his barks thunderous, saliva flying from his mouth as he stood firm and alert. Something unseen had provoked Duke's protective instincts to a fever pitch, his body tensed and ready for confrontation, clearly signaling that the danger was far from over. Attempting to secure Duke by his collar proved futile. The dog, usually obedient, now resisted with surprising strength, pulling against Roger in a desperate attempt to remain in the room. Duke's determination to protect or confront whatever had unsettled him was evident, leaving Roger struggling to maintain his grip amidst the chaos. Switching on the light, Roger's breath caught at the sight before him. The room, once a haven of peace and safety, now harbored a tangible threat that sent a shockwave of fear through him. The immediate danger to his family was all too clear, igniting a rush of adrenaline and a single-minded need to act. Without hesitation, Roger's voice boomed down the hallway. "Get out of the house now!" His command, laced with urgency and fear, was meant to pierce through the panic and ensure Mia's immediate departure. The safety of his family was paramount, overriding all else in that moment of crisis. Hearing Mia's footsteps pounding down the stairs and out the door brought a brief moment of relief to Roger. Now he faced the challenge of withdrawing Duke and escaping the peril that had infiltrated their home. His resolve hardened. No matter what, he would not leave without Duke by his side, ready to face whatever came next together. Roger's efforts to pull Duke away proved ineffective, the dog's determination unyielding. In a moment of desperation, Roger sprinted downstairs, his mind racing for a solution. He knew Duke's weakness and hoped it would be enough to sway him from his protective stance. In the kitchen, Roger seized a jar of peanut butter, scooping a generous amount onto a spoon. He dashed back upstairs, the plan clear in his mind. If anything could break Duke's focus, it was the promise of his favourite treat. Standing at the threshold of Poppy's room, Roger extended the spoonful of peanut butter, allowing its rich scent to drift towards Duke. The familiar, enticing aroma filled the air, a silent plea for Duke to abandon his guard and follow. Duke's barks ceased as the scent of peanut butter reached him. He turned, locking eyes with Roger for a moment before stepping towards the door. The tension in the air seemed to lift slightly as Duke, finally swayed by the lure, made his way to Roger. Seizing the moment, Roger grabbed Duke by the collar, pulling him away from the room. They hurried down the stairs, Roger snatching his house keys in one fluid motion. With Duke in tow, he flung open the front door, stepping into the safety of the night, and locked the door firmly behind them, their ordeal momentarily behind them. "We have to call animal control or 911, Roger panted, reaching Mia, who stood frozen in the front yard, her gaze locked on Poppy's bedroom window. The urgency in his voice mirrored the panic they both felt, knowing that whatever had caused such terror needed to be addressed immediately, and they were ill-equipped to handle it alone. The bedroom light cast a glow that revealed a shadow moving within, prompting Mia to exclaim, "What the heck was that?" Poppy, still in her arms, cried, her sobs a soundtrack to the unfolding mystery. The sight of the shadow only deepened their fear, leaving them more convinced than ever that they needed professional help. Roger's fingers flew over his phone, dialing 911 with trembling hands. He struggled to articulate their situation, requesting both animal control and the police. The gravity of their predicament was hard to convey without sounding bewildering, but Roger did his best, his voice tense with concern. The dispatcher, though confused, promised to send both police and animal control. Roger relayed this to Mia, trying to inject a note of reassurance into his voice. Now, they had nothing to do but wait, their attention divided between the ominous house and comforting Poppy, whose cries had begun to subside. Gradually, Poppy's cries lessened as she noticed Duke beside her, sitting quietly but with his gaze fixed intently on their home. His heavy breathing was the only sound in the quiet of the night, offering a strange sort of comfort to the distressed family. In the midst of their turmoil, Duke's steadfast presence was a silent vow of protection, grounding them as they awaited assistance. The police arrived in the quiet of the night, their presence a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded. They listened intently as Roger and Mia relayed their harrowing experience, their story so bizarre it seemed to hang in the air between them. The officers exchanged looks, their skepticism evident, yet the earnest fear in Roger and Mia's eyes urged them to investigate further. Despite the outlandish nature of the tale, the police decided to enter the house. Their duty compelled them to see for themselves, to peel back the layers of this mystery. Roger and Mia watched, a mix of relief and apprehension colouring their faces as the officers prepared to confront whatever awaited them inside. From the safety of the front yard, Mia watched the officers' silhouettes move through the house, their flashlights casting long shadows against the curtains. They moved methodically, room by room, until they reached Poppy's bedroom. Mia's heart raced, her eyes glued to the window, anticipating what might happen next. The shadows in Poppy's room danced wildly as the officers appeared to engage in a struggle. From Mia's vantage point, it was hard to make out the details, but the sudden movements and the brief silhouette of a scuffle were unmistakable. After a tense moment, it was clear the police had gained the upper hand, the chaotic shadows calming into order. Just as the officers emerged from the house, animal control pulled up, their arrival timing impeccable. Roger and Mia exhaled in relief, the tension easing from their shoulders as they saw the officers step out into the night, a testament to their courage and determination. It was a good thing animal control had arrived when they did, ready to take over the situation. A police officer emerged from the house, an owl dangling from his grasp. He quickly handed it over to the waiting arms of animal control. The sight was almost surreal, the night's terror distilled into the form of a bird that had unwittingly sown chaos in their home. Relief washed over Roger and Mia, mixed with a bewildering sense of disbelief at the turn of events. It was the owl, lost and scared, that had been haunting Poppy's nights, its presence a mystery until now. Roger and Mia exchanged glances, a silent acknowledgement of the unexpected resolution to their nightmare. The owl, seeking escape, had instead become an unwitting spectre in their home, its natural behaviours misinterpreted as a threat in the dark, quiet hours. The owl was whisked away to an animal sanctuary where experts carefully examined it for any signs of injury or illness. In the hands of those trained to deal with such situations, the bird received the attention it needed. It was a gentle process, ensuring that the owl was treated with care and respect, a stark contrast to the fear it had inadvertently caused. After thorough examination, the owl was found to be in good health, albeit stressed from its ordeal. The sanctuary staff worked to ensure its well-being with the goal of releasing it back into the wild. For Roger and Mia, the news was a bittersweet reminder of the night's events, a story that had started in fear but ended in the hope of freedom for a misplaced creature. With the owl gone, the challenge for Poppy was to overcome her fear and sleep peacefully once more. Her room, once a place of terror, was safe again, but convincing a young mind of that reality took time. Roger and Mia stood by her, patient and understanding, as they worked to rebuild the sense of security that had been shaken but not shattered. Poppy's initial fear lingered, a shadow from the night's events. But as days turned to weeks, the memory of the owl's unintended terror began to fade. She found solace in the familiar, her family's love a constant reassurance. Slowly, the traces of trauma ebbed away, replaced by the resilience of youth and the comfort of her parents' unwavering protection. Mia and Roger adopted a new evening routine, ensuring Poppy's bedroom window was securely fastened each night. This simple act became a ritual, a tangible step towards reclaiming the peace that had been disrupted. It was their way of guarding against the unexpected, a promise to Poppy that her room was a safe haven once more. Duke, ever the vigilant guardian, received an abundance of treats for his role in protecting Poppy. His instincts had been a beacon of safety, his presence a barrier against the night's intruder. Mia and Roger showered him with affection, grateful for his protective nature. Duke's loyalty was a reminder of the unspoken bond between them, a family united in the face of adversity. Over time, Poppy's room regained its status as a place of comfort and rest. The fear that once clung to its corners was dispelled, replaced by the warmth of countless goodnight kisses and bedtime stories. Mia and Roger, too, found solace in the return of uninterrupted sleep, their nights no longer fractured by fear. Peace had been restored, their home a sanctuary once again. The owl, after being cared for and rehabilitated, was finally released back into the wild. Its departure was a quiet closure to the saga that had unfolded within their home. Watching it soar into the freedom of its natural habitat, Mia and Roger felt a sense of completion. The cycle had come to an end, with each part of their unexpected journey leading back to a balance between the wild and the safety of home.